Tonight on PrimeTime, the European Union has approved a major new financial package for Ukraine, with lawmakers backing a €90 billion loan after fast-tracking the vote. Europe has voted, and the signal is clear. A very warm welcome wherever you're watching PrimeTime. Now, the European Parliament has approved a major financial package for Ukraine, backing a €90 billion loan after fast-tracking the vote. Now, the decision reflects broad support across the Parliament's largest political groups. The move allows the European Commission to raise funds on international markets backed by the EU's long-term budget, alongside changes to existing funding mechanisms for Ukraine. Officials had warned that without this support, Kyiv could face a serious cash shortfall by April, at a sensitive moment as diplomatic efforts continue. The vote had originally been planned for later this month, alongside a special session marking 4 years since the start of the conflict. Now, my first guest tonight on this subject is Dr. Ahmad Shadov, a human rights defender and political analyst who is joining us from right here in Baku, Azerbaijan. Dr. Shadov, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So the vote's gone through then, very clear support, but what do you think this says about the political priorities right now in Brussels?
Yes, thank you for having me in your program. First of all, I want to start by giving a clear picture of the situation today. What is happening in Ukraine is not just a regional conflict. It's a test of international law, test of European credibility. And Ukraine is a sovereign country, and its borders and people's rights must be respected. And the invasion by Russia breaks these rules. From my perspective as a human rights defender, this is not just a political problem. It's a real and moral problem. And Europe's response is about protecting the rules that keep countries safe. And it's about showing that force cannot rewrite borders. At the same time, the conflict affects Europe directly, and stability in Ukraine means stability in Europe as well. That's why the EU's decision to approve the 90 billion package is a very strong message to Russia, message to all the world. And it's about money, of course, but it's also about credibility. It's about long-term strategy and principle. And Europe is signaling that it's serious, it's united, and it's ready to act for the long term. And regarding your question, the European Parliament's approval tells us that Brussels prioritizes stability and continuity above all. And Europe understands that Ukraine cannot function without predictable support. And funding is very essential for salaries, for public energy supply, for everything, for defense logistics, and even short delays can create very serious problems in the front line inside the country. And by approving this package, the European Parliament is showing that action and credibility are more important than lengthy internal debates. And this shows that Brussels is prioritizing practical results for Ukraine and sending a very strong political message to Moscow as well. The message is clear. Europe is united and serious. And from a broader perspective, this is also about long-term thinking as well, because Brussels is signaling that the EU views the Ukraine conflict not just as a short-term emergency, but as a test for European security and rules-based order as well. And protecting sovereignty, supporting democratic governance, and maintaining stability are now clear priorities for the EU itself.
And the EU does seem to be very keen, some might say desperate, to increase its credibility in this. It's constantly complaining that it hasn't been invited to the top table on these important issues. Do you think that the EU's position now, do you think that what they've achieved with this vote will fit in a more effective way alongside other diplomatic efforts that are going on around Ukraine?
Of course, the vote strengthens Europe's diplomatic position significantly, and when Ukraine has guaranteed support, it can negotiate from a position of strength. It does not have to make decisions out of fear or desperation, and stability gives Ukraine leverage at the negotiation table as well. At the same time, the package sends a clear message to Moscow, to Putin authorities as well. The message is Europe is serious, united, and committed for the long term. And this is written because diplomacy works best when both sides operate from predictable and reliable positions, and financial support and diplomacy reinforce each other. And by providing stability, the EU ensured that any talks are meaningful, and negotiation under pressure really produces lasting agreements. And with predictable support, Ukraine, Kyiv can engage in actions being forced into concessions that weaken its sovereignty as a state.
Do you think it's really sustainable that to go ahead on this long-term course of committing so much money? When you look at the domestic situations of the biggest players, Mr. Macron, Mr. Merz, I mean, these are hardly leaders with strong mandates at home. Do you think that locking Europe into this commitment could be something that their own citizens over time might start to reject?
You know, it increases long-term commitment, but it does not allow flexibility. Kyiv, Moscow, and the international community understand that Europe is serious and that support is sustained, and this creates political anchor showing that EU will not withdraw suddenly. And at the same time, Europe can adopt how funds are used, and if a settlement or ceasefire emerges, money can shift to region, public services and humanitarian needs. And the key point is to provide Ukraine with a stable base to operate and negotiate. Of course, there is some different opinions inside the European countries as well in terms of to support Ukraine or not. For example, Slovakia, they are thinking differently. They are not for supporting Ukraine in this point, and they are not united with Brussels. But in my view, this package shows strategic foresight, and Europe is creating conditions where Ukraine is strong, predictable, and able to survive, and it anchors EU credibility and momentum while leaving room to adjust based on how talks evolve. And this is about being both decisive and flexible. So this support for Ukraine is very important, and it will have very impacts on negotiations with Russia.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point you make. And of course, the EU has been criticised at times for being all talk and no action. Well, here it has delivered something very practical. What do you think the speed and scale of this decision tells us about the internal workings at the moment within Brussels?
You know, the speed and scale show that countries closest to the conflict or most in West security had the strongest influence. These states understood that hesitation could weaken Ukraine and Europe as well, and they pushed for fast, decisive action. Other countries were more cautious, concerned about costs, domestic politics, but they accepted compromises to maintain unity, and this shows that Europe can balance urgency and consensus in this issue. And the process also shows that EU is maturing as a decision-making body. Even in a crisis, it can act quickly while keeping negotiations and compromise alive. And it's a sign that Europe can act decisively without fractionally, and between speed and careful agreement a lesson for EU cohesion.
And finally, do you think this could be a turning point for the EU strategically in relation to this conflict? I mean, all eyes have been on Mr. Trump, what's happening in Russia. The EU, at the sort of a few months ago, only were sort of discounted by some analysts as being almost like an irrelevance. But this is quite a strong turnaround. Do you think it could be the moment when the EU starts to play a more decisive role in ending the conflict?
There is a clear shift, and the use of common debt for multi-year support shows long-term thinking, and there is different approach from United States as well. The Trump administration is not supporting Ukraine as strong as the previous Biden administration. But anyway, Europe now is acting independently without support of United States of America, because the Europe understands, the EU understands that if Ukraine will be defeated, the next be the Europe itself, and that's why European countries tries to support Ukraine until the end, and never allow Russia to win this war. And all sanctions against Russia shows that Europe is united in this issue, and the EU wants to stay involved in Ukraine's security, its institutions and economy, and this is about building resilience, not just responding to immediate threats. And by this way, Europe is showing that it can uphold law, principle, and stability over time. So I think that the conflict, the war in Ukraine, is not just conflict and clashes between Russia and Ukraine. It's already a war between EU and Russia, and and Ukraine is just like battlefield between EU and Russia.
Very interesting indeed. Dr. Shahidov, we thank you for your analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, there'll be plenty more news and analysis. Do stay with us.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etibar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Etibar, come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here that's been cooking. That is amazing.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Katie Wilson, and A News Talks has a brand new look. In this new episode, we sit down with 3 voices, 3 personal stories, and 3 perspectives that help us understand the world we live in today.
I was really excited, and at the same time, it's a new chapter in my life.
So far, the biggest project that I've gotten myself into.
From academia to real-life experience, A News Talks goes beyond headlines, focusing on people, ideas, and the journeys that shape them.
Not by the role you have, not by the salary you have. That's what I define as a success.
Honest conversations, meaningful dialogue. This is A News Talks, coming soon.
Welcome out, you're watching Primetime. Now, just a reminder of our top story tonight. In the last few hours, the EU has approved a €90 billion loan to Ukraine. And to get into this further, my next guest is Mark McNamee, the co-founder of the Ukraine Business Network, who joins us from Kyiv in Ukraine. Mark, it's great to have you. I know we've had 1 or 2 challenges connecting you due to the challenges that you've got where you are. We thank you very much indeed for persevering, and we hope we'll stay with us for some time. Let's get into the details of this to begin with now. The loan's obviously been approved, as we've just said. How significant is this going to be for the economy inside the country, for economic stability inside the country over the next few months?
Well, absolutely critical. Without it, to be very blunt, we would have had severe economic instability. We'd have had macroeconomic instability within a matter of months. And when I talk about macroeconomic instability, meaning we would have had to see a rapid diversion of remaining funds to the front, which would have been dwindling over time, to simply protect national security and defense, while all other areas, quite literally, of government spending would have fallen apart, which would have then driven severe problems within the macroeconomic environment. So that's how you'd see inflation rise dramatically, interest rates having to go up, severe unemployment, and this all would have occurred within literally a matter of weeks and months, which means you would have had a humanitarian disaster. And we're talking about millions of people who would have had to flee the country once again, as we saw in early 2022. And then the front only to hold out for a relatively short period of time beyond that. So this is an absolute catastrophe. But Europe clearly understood the existential crisis that would have arisen here in very short period of time, which would have, of course, upended Europe itself. If you see, in 5, 7, 9, 10 million Ukrainians within a matter of months sprinting into Europe for salvation. So it would have been absolutely catastrophic, frankly, without this loan. And that's why we always fundamentally believed, and we told our clients, the loan had to happen as a matter of existential stability for the EU as well.
Mark, a question that some of our viewers might be wondering is, in practical terms, how does Ukraine pay this money back? Is it going to be possible to do that, or is it really a loan in name only, a kind of a euphemism, really meaning a gift?
Yeah, well, more or less. I mean, the loan is interest-free, so that right off the bat, obviously, those are beneficial terms. But then also, it's understood that the loan will be paid back upon the end of the war, and using likely as things develop, using the underlying assets of Russia's foreign exchange reserves. But that'll all be, of course, hammered out in the details of whatever ceasefire or peace deal we end up getting down the line. But that's frankly a worry that can be resolved in the what seems, from sitting here today, the relatively distant future, when we need to just simply get by and continue to survive as a nation, particularly in this extreme period with the loss of heat and light, electricity, etc.
Yeah, an incredibly difficult period well, it has been throughout, but particularly with the weather being so cold, very, very difficult for people in the country. You're obviously there. In terms of how the impact of this will be felt by people on the ground, where do you expect it to be felt first? Where this positive impact? Will it be in public finances, in infrastructure, amongst the business community? Where's it going to start to change people's lives?
To be perfectly honest, I think, and I can say this concretely from speaking with everyday civilians, on the street, whether that's cab drivers or my Ukrainian family here, who aren't necessarily paying attention to these macro developments, the geopolitical issues and EU loan, and what this actually fundamentally means. So frankly, a lot of the people on the street didn't quite appreciate how dramatic the situation had become. So they're not going to actually necessarily notice since we were able to get this loan and maintain some continuity in the spending. So to answer your question, I would say the public finances, because the government was very well aware of the drastic nature of the current situation on the ground here. So this gives a lot of relief because you would have been seeing a diversion of all spending to defense and national security, and quickly depleting, literally within a matter of weeks to months, all other government financing, which means the economy would have collapsed in due course. Businesses and people didn't quite recognize that. Western investors, though, as far as business confidence, were well aware of that. So if this loan did not come through, you would have seen a pretty sharp drop in any level of investment appetite from any Western investors. But that said, there's capital controls, so they couldn't necessarily pull their money out of the country anyhow. So to answer the question, public finances, I suppose, would be the right answer.
And you mentioned, it's a very important point, you mentioned investor confidence there, Mark. Now, so much of the world now is dependent on international markets, on making sure that clear signals of confidence translate into beneficial economic relationships for nation states. Obviously, it's difficult for Ukraine because before the war ends, before the conflict is resolved, Ukraine also has to go about the business of kind of rebuilding confidence in the country again. A very difficult thing to do. How is Kyiv going about starting that process?
You mean rebuilding confidence with the Western investors?
Yes.
Yes. So this really concretely, this is the best step so far to get this signal, because if you go back since February of 2022, we were getting these constant piecemeal disbursements of money, whether from the U.S., EU on bilateral donations from EU countries. And it would always just keep on sort of kicking the ball down the road. This is actually
markets hate that. Market hates that. They hate that uncertainty, right?
Of course. And that's a massive problem, seeing this constant, when is the war going to end? And we don't know when the war is going to end. But then also, how much financing and for how long do we actually have? So it doesn't necessarily, of course, buttress a lot of confidence in Western investors. Plus, again, as I mentioned, you have those capital controls, which is always a deterrent to foreign investors. So those are all, of course, worrying signs. But this is why it's an excellent sign at the exact right time, when Ukraine was really in one of its worst moments of the war, to get this amount of money at this moment, which gives us the financing really solidly, we can say, with some other donors coming through, obviously, Australia, Japan, Canada, some other countries. This gets us financially pretty much all the way through 2027. So now for the Western investors to feel comfortable about, we have enough money for the front, manpower and equipment, yes, not quite enough, but enough to continue the war and to repel Russia, while we can have macroeconomic stability quite solidly, feel comfortable about that for the next 2 years. And that's, by the way, this is maybe the silver lining in the fact that the EU did not take Russia's foreign exchange reserves, did not do the reparations loan as Chancellor Merz was pushing for, the 210 billion euro reparations loan. Everyone was disappointed, including myself, that they didn't do that. But the good news is that, let's say in a year and a half, 2 years, they can then tap that loan later on and then give another lifeline to Ukraine for several years after that. So this really, it's a phenomenal signal to Western investors and to the Kremlin to tell them, you can't simply outlast Ukraine. The West is backing them solidly financially, and you can't win on the battlefield either. So if Putin's trying to win this war of attrition, Europe just said it's not going to be so easy, and you're years away from winning that war of attrition.
Yeah, it's a remarkable situation, remarkably positive turn for Kyiv. How do you expect the Kremlin to react? What will be their thought process? Do you think this could sort of drive them back to the negotiating table or force them into entertaining possibilities that previously they had said were their absolute red lines?
Right. So this in and of itself, absolutely not. This is not enough. Russia needs to feel more pressure. But this is a critical component in order to bringing Russia back, without which you would not be able to get Russia back, because Russia would smell the blood, see the weakness, and know we just need to keep pushing and we can win this war in due course. So this is a critical component, but it's inadequate. The other features that we need in the Western policy, they've been known. It just requires the necessary political will and as well, a recognition from the White House under Trump that more pressure is needed on Russia in order to get them to make a deal, and not just simply some diplomatic acumen and genius that Trump believes he can employ in order to get Putin to magically agree to some deal. So we need more pressure. This is part of it. Telling Russia Ukraine can last minimum another 2 years, and we have more financing to give to make them last beyond that. But then we need stronger sanctions, which fortunately, again, we're starting to see. We're seeing not only did Trump actually, to his credit, in October, put on some of the most significant sanctions that we've seen in the last couple of years, sanctioning Rosneft and Lukoil, which had a significant impact. But we're now seeing the U.S. and European countries much more active in going after Russia's shadow fleet. We're seeing Trump administration pushing on India successfully the last couple of months in reducing their purchases of Russia's oil. These things are all having a pretty significant impact. Russia's energy export revenues have gone down dramatically the last several months, and this will continue the rest of this year. So if we see some more pushing, EU is considering a 20th sanctions package that goes after not just an oil price cap, but actually going after all maritime services to and financial services to Russian oil exports. So these things are pushing it. So again, in combination, supporting Ukraine with more financing, supporting Ukraine with more weaponry, pushing on Russia with much greater pressure with sanctions. And that's why we still do feel confident. These things are slowly, unfortunately it's taken 4 years, but they're all coming together gradually, which encourages us to feel much more confident here on the ground in Ukraine. And what we've been telling our clients at UBN Network, that Russia is going to start feeling more and more strongly compelled, and the trade-offs for them in continuing this war are becoming much more severe in the coming months over the course of this year, that we believe Russia will be compelled through pressure. Putin was only going to be compelled through pressure. Now he's feeling more and more of that pressure to be compelled to consider some concessions, some compromises that earlier they were red lines, as you said, that he most definitely would not consider. So we're moving in a better direction, but we're still months away from seeing some genuine interest in concessions from the Kremlin.
And finally, Mark, I just want to get your perspective. You're there, obviously. You've mentioned your family is there. How are businesses coping? Small businesses, larger businesses? I mean, it's one thing to think about just surviving when the bombs are flying overhead, but it's quite another to then thrive and build business relationships, develop technology projects to work on infrastructure solutions. What is it like for those businesses, and how are they adapting and coping?
Well, to answer your question for this immediate period, so literally since about middle of December to date, when this has been one of the worst winters in about 15, 20 years, by the way, minus 15, minus 20, minus 25 degrees, and going days without heat or electricity. So that obviously has a significant impact on morale for the country, for businesses, for investors, but it fundamentally impacts demand, and it impacts operations. So just to give you a couple examples, for consumer goods companies, they actually saw an uptick in sales, November and December, a lot of impulse buying because frankly, the psychological impact of this, people being scared of what's coming next, what's coming in here in the winter. So you saw actually retail sales going up, people sort of stocking up on certain products or buying aspirational products that maybe they wouldn't buy under other circumstances. But then for a lot of B2B companies, it's been quite difficult. We run a consulting group here, right? Our meetings since basically middle of December to date, so nearly 2 months, have all been canceled or delayed because people are obviously lack of electricity, unable to connect. People have left the country. Over 500,000 citizens of just Kyiv, and this includes myself, by the way, have left Kyiv for several weeks and went to regional towns or family members who live elsewhere, to live with them for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, things like this, to just sort of get through this period. So that has a severe impact, obviously, on operations, on demand, on people's ability to just simply work. Manufacturing sites, it's a major problem. Metallurgy struggled in particular. Some of these other, the process-oriented manufacturing that relies upon a continuous high-capacity volume of energy, and not having that, unfortunately, shuts things down. And then that of course, impacts output, which impacts sales, which impacts revenue, which impacts the ability to pay your teams, wage arrears going up. So you can just sort of imagine the secondary, tertiary effects on businesses, on consumers, on wages, and that's what's going on currently. In the coming months, though, I can just tell you from our client base and our business community, no one left, right? No one's considering leaving the country. They're just waiting for the better times to come, and then, of course, continue their business as was, and some losses over these difficult winter months, but they've been performing fairly well enough in the months and years prior to this winter, and expect to see some economic growth and recovery in demand in the coming months. So difficult period, but as it is with Ukraine, I mean, this is the 5th year of the war. It's just the latest iteration of difficulties. We get through it, we push on, and we move to the future, and we're going to make it happen.
We get through it, we push on, and we move to the future. Mark, we always appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business stories of the day with Katie Wilson. Don't go away.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etsy Bar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here, that's been cooking. That is amazing.
A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Now, Katie Wilson is with us with the very latest business news. Katie, what's on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, there's a landmark trial taking place in California against the world's largest social media companies, and I'll also have results from the drinks and oil industries. Let's get started. We begin tonight in Los Angeles, where the world's largest social media companies have been accused of creating addiction machines, as a landmark trial began in California examining the mental health effects of Instagram and YouTube. Let's take a look.
A California state court case over whether Instagram and YouTube harmed a woman's mental health through addictive app design kicks off on Monday. It's seen as a test of whether big tech platforms can be held liable for harming children. The 20-year-old woman, identified as KGM, filed the lawsuit against Instagram parent company Meta and Alphabet's Google, which owns YouTube. According to court filings, she says the attention-grabbing design of the platforms got her addicted to them at a young age. She alleges the apps fueled her depression and suicidal thoughts and wants to hold the companies liable. A verdict against the tech firms could lead the way for similar cases in state court and shake the industry's long-standing US legal defense against claims of user harm. Google, Meta, TikTok and Snap face thousands of lawsuits in California. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is expected to be called as a witness at the trial. TikTok and Snap settled with KGM before the trial.
French oil giant Total Energies is easing off the buyback pedal. Despite a bumper quarter for refining, weaker oil and gas prices have taken the shine off profits, prompting the company to halve share repurchases in the first quarter.
French oil giant Total Energies will halve share buybacks in the first quarter. The firm said Wednesday it will lower its first quarter buyback to $750 million worth of shares, echoing similar moves by peers. Total had previously kept buybacks at $2 billion per quarter since mid-2022 and repurchased $1.5 billion in shares in the fourth quarter. The announcement came as the energy major also reported a fall in fourth quarter net income. It was down to $3.8 billion from $4.4 billion a year earlier, below analyst projections. Low oil and gas prices cancelled out soaring fourth quarter profit from refining fuels and proceeds from renewable assets stake sales. Total said it ramped up oil and gas production to compensate for a big drop in both Brent crude and liquefied natural gas prices. However, earnings for the refining and chemical businesses surged by 215%, reaching $1 billion. Total has previously said margins at European refineries during the period jumped 213% compared to the previous year. The company's CEO had attributed the increase to US sanctions on Russian providers and an EU import ban on fuels derived from Russian oil.
And it's not just Total Energies tightening the purse strings. BP is also hitting pause on buybacks as it pivots back towards oil and gas ahead of a new chief executive. Profits met expectations, but it's the strategy shift that's turning heads. Take a look at this.
BP has made a shift ahead of new CEO Meg O'Neill taking the helm in April. It paused its share buyback programme and wrote down $4 billion in its renewables and biogas business. That's while it reported Tuesday that quarterly profit was in line with forecasts at $1.54 billion, up 32% from a year earlier. The oil giant said it would invest the excess cash in oil and gas projects where it expects better returns. And it's looking towards a Brazilian oil field discovery, estimating it holds 8 billion barrels of liquids in place. This followed an ill-fated foray into renewables under Bernard Looney's reign between 2020 and 2023. BP's buyback halt to trim debt was a possibility analysts predicted in the industry, as oil and gas prices continue to stay low. Rival oil majors Shell and Exxon have held firm on buybacks, while Equinor slashed its programme by 70%. BP repurchased shares worth $750 million in the last 3 months, data showed, and have bought back shares every quarter since 2021. Shares were down around 5% in morning trade.
From oil to drinks now, and Heineken is tightening its belt as the beer industry feels the effects of dry January. The Dutch brewer says it will cut up to 6,000 jobs and dial back its profit growth ambitions as weak demand and health-conscious consumers weigh on the industry.
Heineken said Wednesday it will cut up to 6,000 jobs from its global workforce. It makes up almost 7% of the firm's workforce and comes as the company and its peers face weak demand. The Dutch brewer also set lower expectations for profit growth this year on Wednesday. It expects expansion of between 2% and 6% against the 4% to 8% growth it guided for last year. The world's number 2 brewer by market value is currently searching for a new CEO, following the surprise resignation of Dolf van der Brink in January. The maker of Tiger and Amstel, alongside its namesake lager, has promised to deliver higher growth with fewer resources, a move it hopes will reassure dissatisfied investors who say it has fallen behind on efficiency. Sales across the sector are faltering amid strained consumer finances and more recent bad weather. Rival beer and spirit makers are also cutting costs, selling assets and slowing production after years of slow sales. Alcohol makers also face long-term threats like rising health warnings, competition from alternatives and disruptions like weight loss drugs.
And it's not just Heineken, Coca-Cola is also feeling the fizz go flat. The drinks giant missed fourth quarter sales estimates and is now bracing for slower growth in 2026 as shoppers in North America and Asia push back against higher prices. Investors didn't love it either as shares slid in early trade.
Coca-Cola on Tuesday missed Wall Street expectations for fourth quarter revenue. It also forecast muted growth for 2026 as demand weakened in North America and Asia. The news sent its shares down about 4% in pre-market trading. The company has been raising prices for its beverages to offset higher input costs. But it comes at a time when US consumers are increasingly looking for cheaper options as inflation squeezes budgets. Rival PepsiCo said last week it would cut prices on key snacks such as Lay's and Doritos. Consumers had pushed back against several rounds of price hikes over the last few years. Coca-Cola expects 2026 organic revenue to grow 4 to 5%, compared with a 5% rise last year. The company reported fourth quarter revenue of $11.82 billion, missing estimates of just over $12 billion.
And finally, if you're planning on buying flowers this Valentine's Day, chances are they'll come from Colombia. Millions of roses have landed in the US right on time, but growers say rising costs and tariffs are putting the industry under real pressure.
Millions of Colombian roses arrived in the United States just in time for Valentine's Day. But industry experts worry the world's second largest flower exporter won't survive new economic challenges. Colombia, which trails only the Netherlands in global exports, shipped approximately 65,000 tons of fresh-cut flowers to the U.S. between January 15th and February 9th. The Valentine's season typically accounts for 20% of annual sales, according to the industry group Asoco Flores. But the holiday rush is being overshadowed by a 10% U.S. tariff imposed last April as part of President Donald Trump's broader trade measures. The U.S. accounts for about 80% of Colombia's flower exports. Jose Antonio Restrepo is the manager of a flower producing and trading company near Bogota.
We've been seriously affected. Last year, a 10% tariff, which represents more than $200 million for the industry. On top of that, there's an exchange rate that we haven't seen in many years. And lastly, the minimum wage issue. In a business like flowers, labor accounts for about 60%, and around 85% of our people earn the minimum wage. So we're in very adverse, very difficult circumstances.
He warns that without a shift in economic conditions, the industry could face widespread layoffs and farm closures by this summer. Growers are also battling a peso that has strengthened almost 12% against the dollar over the past year, and a 23% rise in minimum wage, factors that are eroding competitiveness and squeezing margins. Flower cultivation employs almost 250,000 workers in Colombia. On the packing floor, Susana Vega said the holiday still brings her a sense of purpose.
An immense joy, knowing that we're bringing happiness to someone, to a woman, to a mother, to someone so admired by a loved one. And that we're benefiting ourselves as well, and helping a company move forward to overcome many of the challenges that are happening right now. A very beautiful joy.
How many men will be using that excuse then? That's your business news roundup for the day. Back to you, Guy.
Katie, my wife sometimes tunes in around about this time, so I'm going to play it safe and make no comment at all. Thank you very much indeed.
Very wise.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at talks in Washington, where Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet Donald Trump, with Iran high on the agenda following recent indirect nuclear contacts in Muscat. Do stay with us.
I'm Katie Wilson, and A News Talks has a brand new look. In this new episode, we sit down with three voices, three personal stories, and three perspectives that help us understand the world we live in today.
I was really excited, and at the same time, it's a new chapter in my life.
So far, the biggest project that I've gotten myself into.
From academia to real-life experience, A News Talks goes beyond headlines, focusing on people, ideas, and the journeys that shape them.
Not by the role you have, not by the salary you have. That's what I define as a success.
Honest conversations, meaningful dialogue. This is A News Talks, coming soon.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etty Bar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Etty Bar, come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here that's been cooking. That is amazing.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to Primetime. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to meet US President Donald Trump in Washington today. Now, the talks are set to focus on negotiations with Iran following indirect nuclear discussions between Iranian and US officials held in Muscat last week. Iranian officials have ruled out including the country's missile program in the talks and said Tehran is seeking recognition of its right to enrich uranium.
You say Iran is so weak.
Well, joining us now is our man in Washington, D.C., Ubay Shahbandar. Ubay, always great to see you. Let's look at this then. We're being, from Washington, what we're being told about the focus of today's meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, it all looks very positive. Just give us your sense of the substance of those talks.
Well, at the center of the talks that are ongoing right now between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is Iran and its ballistic missile program. This is very notable, the fact that Bibi Netanyahu has held so many meetings recently with President Trump, and for the Israeli prime minister to fly in to Washington to sit down with special envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who've been holding those negotiations with Iran in a neutral Oman, and then for him to sit down with President Trump means that there's something of high strategic and immediate value that the Israeli leader needs to discuss with President Trump. Let's not forget that the possibility, the very real possibility of American airstrikes against Iran's missile facilities and perhaps whatever is left of their underground nuclear program still looms large. These negotiations, although they are taking place between the Americans and the Iranians, have not necessarily led to a breakthrough. Well, we are seeing reports in Washington that Bibi Netanyahu wants President Trump to condition any agreement with Iran and its nuclear program on an agreement for the government in Tehran to also significantly reduce their ballistic missile program. That is what we're hearing is a major priority for Bibi Netanyahu. So he wants the nuclear file and the missile file to be connected. Whether or not President Trump will agree to that remains to be seen, because we have also seen reports that while the Iranian government is willing to discuss the future of its nuclear program, particularly given that it's essentially been mostly destroyed with only some remaining stockpile of highly enriched uranium that still remains in the possession of the Iranians. But we have also seen reports that the Iranian government really is not willing to budge on the issue of its long-range and intermediate-range ballistic missile program, mainly because, according to all the analysts that I've spoken with, the Iranian government sees its ability to launch these missiles against Israel and potentially against American military bases in the Arabian Gulf as the only guarantee against regime change and against any attempts to bring down the government in Tehran. So that seems to be the gap here that is likely going to be at the heart of the discussions between Bibi Netanyahu and President Trump.
Now, Ube, as usual with things like this, analysts on all sides of the debate are weighing in with their perspective. To some, they're suggesting that Israel's influence on these talks is really a provocative and going to be an unhelpful influence on Donald Trump. Others are saying, well, no, of course Israel has an absolute right to be at the heart of these discussions for obvious reasons. When you look at the US newspapers this morning, what is the tone on that debate? What are you sensing that people are saying about Netanyahu's intentions when it comes to this meeting?
Well, we've seen the media really sort of hone in on whether or not Bibi Netanyahu will convince President Trump to take a more of a hardline position against Iran, which would inevitably lead to a major conflict. Because remember, any American strikes against Iran and its ballistic missile program, which experts believe has been largely rebuilt since that 12-day war last year, will likely also include the Israelis and would also likely result in Iran launching ballistic missiles against Israel. So the talk of the town here in Washington amongst the media, amongst pundits is, will President Trump, who said that he wants to deal with Iran, really accept a much more narrowly focused deal that does not include Iran's support for regional proxy militias and terror groups, and a deal that would not include a firm guarantee by Iran to stop expanding its ballistic missile program, which has the ability, as we saw in the 12-day war last year, to strike major Israeli military and civilian targets? Or will President Trump essentially give an ultimatum to the Iranians based on the input of Prime Minister Netanyahu, telling the Iranians, hey, you must agree to all of these conditions. Otherwise, you're going to face the full wrath of the American carrier strike group in the region and the Israeli Air Force. And now we're also seeing new reports that President Trump has said that he may be considering deploying a second aircraft carrier strike group into the Arabian Gulf region, which would put a much bigger amount of American warplanes and missiles and cruise missiles right at the doorstep of Iran. So everyone right now is trying to read the tea leaves here in Washington on the outcome of this meeting. Of course, you are going to see President Trump reiterate the strong alliance between the United States and Israel when it comes to speaking to the press and speaking to the public. The question right now that everyone is wondering, American media and Israeli media, is can Bibi Netanyahu convince President Trump to really focus not only on the nuclear program in Iran, but also on the fact that Iran has also largely rebuilt its ballistic missile program and is in reconstructing much of the sites that were destroyed in the 12-day war. The Israelis simply don't have enough interceptors and capacity to destroy all of Iran's underground missile launch sites. So Bibi Netanyahu is in Washington to try to convince President Trump, if you are going to launch strikes, it also must be much wider in scope to include ballistic missile sites that are essentially both underground and they're in military facilities all around Iran. So that would potentially lead to a much more sustained and multi-day campaign rather than one simply focused on the nuclear program. So that is really the talk here in Washington on whether these negotiations between the Israeli side and the American side will ultimately lead to the collapse of the talks with Iran, or perhaps to a big deal. The president always says that he wants big deals. And right now, everyone's watching because this could mean war or perhaps peace.
Indeed, Ube. And let's just go back to the indirect discussions with Iran. What's your take on what happened in Muscat last week?
Well, it looks like Iran was very much convinced that President Trump was on the verge of launching strikes. And because of that fear of the fact that President Trump, was very much did launch strikes last year in support of the Israeli air campaign that decimated and set back Iran's underground nuclear program by years. So that fear that President Trump was on the cusp of ordering yet another round of strikes pushed the Iranian government to accept indirect talks, but in Oman with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and of course Steve Witkoff, the president's special Middle East envoy. But these talks are, perhaps while they are indirect, they are also in a ways direct. They are sitting in the same hotel. They're sitting in neutral territory in Oman. And I think there is a realization in Tehran that the government perhaps could not survive a sustained American strike against its military facilities. So they are hoping that the diplomatic initiative will stave off President Trump from ordering another round of devastating airstrikes. Because at the same time, we have also seen President Trump express support and solidarity with the Iranian protesters that had been taking to the streets in recent days. So there is also a political calculation here in Iran that this is not just whether or not their military or their nuclear program or missile program can survive American strikes, but whether or not the government itself could survive American strikes along with the Israeli Air Force. So there is a real urgency here to try to use diplomacy as a way to stave off President Trump from ordering a massive round of strikes against not just what's left of the nuclear program, but also key strategic military facilities that the government in Tehran needs to survive politically.
Yeah, you're right, Ibe. There's been a noticeable shift in rhetoric from Tehran. Although at the same time, we've heard these red lines, particularly around uranium enrichment. Will Washington just kind of let that go, do you think?
Well, we've heard from President Trump saying that any attempt to try to recover the highly enriched uranium that survived the 12-day airstrikes will lead to military repercussions. And it's interestingly enough, we've seen the Iranian government, for the most part, has focused largely on rebuilding its ballistic missile stockpile. They had around 2,000 long-range precision-guided missiles, according to the estimates that we've seen here in Washington. About half of them were depleted either because they were fired or because they were intercepted by American or Israeli interceptors. Now, most of that stockpile, according to all estimates, has been rebuilt. But very little has been done by the Iranians on a large scale to rebuild its underground enrichment capability of its existing uranium stockpile, highly enriched uranium stockpile, as well as trying to enrich a new stockpile. So there has been clearly a reaction by Tehran of President Trump's threats to not really go full steam ahead to try to recover and rebuild its extensive underground enrichment and weaponization facilities for its nuclear program, but more of a focus and a prioritization of rebuilding its ballistic missiles that can reach Israeli civilian and military targets. So and President Trump has also said that, hey, he's not going to accept endless rounds of negotiations like that took place during the Obama administration. So there's a clear understanding here in Washington, also by Bibi Netanyahu, that this is really an amount of a few days, perhaps a few weeks, on whether or not President Trump will decide one way or another to go towards continuing that diplomatic route with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, or to essentially conclude, hey, the Iranians are not going to accept our demands. Let's go with the military option.
And just on that, finally, Ube, there'll be clearly back-channel negotiations going on. We've had the indirect talks that, as you say, are really quite direct talks. We've seen a slight shift in rhetoric. Will this be enough, do you think, to prevent conflict? Are the chances of conflict lesser now than they were, say, a week ago?
Well, in a way, the chances of conflict are lesser now, but also never been higher at the same time. I mean, look, you have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff who are leading these negotiations. They directly they respond right to President Trump. And you have also a high-level Iranian delegation in these talks that directly adhere to the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. So if these talks don't go anywhere, then certainly there'll be no options left for any sort of diplomatic resolution. Many here in Washington are wondering, though, the wild card here, of course, is Israel. Because if the United States accepts a narrowly defined agreement with Iran, only on its nuclear program, but an agreement that doesn't touch its missile program, the question is, will the Israelis launch an attack against Iran's ballistic missile program while they have that window of opportunity, given that Iran's nuclear program is so significantly reduced and damaged? And that might very well draw in the U.S. military into a conflict despite these talks.
Ube Shabanda, our man in DC, we thank you as always. Appreciate your analysis. Thank you. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at Indonesia preparing up to 8,000 troops for possible deployment into Gaza. Stay with us.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etibar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Timo, come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here, that's been cooking. That is amazing.
I'm Katie Wilson, and A News Talks has a brand new look. In this new episode, we sit down with 3 voices, 3 personal stories, and 3 perspectives that help us understand the world we live in today.
I was really excited, and at the same time, it's a new chapter in my life.
So far, the biggest project that I've gotten myself into.
From academia to real-life experience, A News Talks goes beyond headlines, focusing on people, ideas, and the journeys that shape them.
Not by the role you have, not by the salary you have. That's what I define as a success.
Honest conversations, meaningful dialogue. This is A News Talks, coming soon.
A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Now, Indonesia says it's preparing up to 8,000 soldiers for possible deployment to Gaza, becoming the first country to move forward under the second phase of the US-brokered ceasefire agreement. Training has already begun with a focus on medical and engineering roles. The plan comes as part of a United Nations mandated international stabilisation force and follows Indonesia's joining of the US-led Board of Peace. Now, meanwhile, medical sources say 5 Palestinians were killed in fresh violence on Tuesday. At least 581 Palestinians have been killed, with more than 1,550 injured in Israeli attacks in Gaza since the ceasefire began. Okay, joining us now is Mohammed Ali Zafar, a research scholar at the University of Oxford and an independent political risk analyst. Mr. Zafar, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, it's a large number of troops that Indonesia is preparing to deploy. Why is it that Jakarta has emerged as a kind of a suitable choice, do you think, at this point?
Right. So thank you first of all for having me on your show. I believe that Jakarta seems to be a natural choice at the moment because Israel has raised concerns about the deployment of forces or other countries, especially Muslim world, from the Muslim world joining the International Stabilization Force, especially, for example, there exists a statement from the Foreign Minister of Israel regarding showing concern towards the deployment of Turkish forces in Gaza Strip. So I think this remains an important point to ponder upon, that whatever is happening at the moment seems to be aligning with backdoor negotiations that have been happening between Trump and Bibi Netanyahu as well, that what sort of forces, which specific country seems to be a possibly an option that suits Israel at the moment in terms of not causing too much concern to Israel's objective, at the same time acting as an important force that leads to stability but does not engage regional countries for a major conflict-related situation. So I think in that regard, Indonesia seems to be a good fit. It has, the understanding of peacekeeping forces. For now, around 2,600 Indonesian forces are part of the peacekeeping efforts. In the past, they have experience as well. So it seems to be a likely better option in this sort of scenario, especially with there's a huge level of understanding within the region as well, that Indonesia is far away from Israel's interests in the Middle East. So I think that seems to be a safe choice at the moment.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because of course part of this is about getting the political agreement, part of it is about financing the situation, but of course a key part, as you've just touched on, is about the sort of the cultural assimilation, the acceptance of the people themselves to the troops that are coming. Do you believe that this huge uptick in numbers from Indonesia, do you believe that they will be accepted by the people on the ground?
Well, it remains a pressing concern that will they be accepted or not, because there is a lot on the table, and it seems like there will be a lot more questions that need to be answered. Since even in these Muslim countries as well, there have been an outcry from the public as well in terms of opening of the debate about what will happen, why 8,000 soldiers from Indonesia, even back home in Indonesia, the president is facing backlash from the public as well in terms of should they send forces at the moment, will they be involved in the disarmament of Hamas, what will be the future look like, and so far the 20 points of Trump, there exists lack of clarity in terms of the idea of Palestinian statehood or the future of West Bank. So there exists a lot of questions, and that is one of the reasons why many analysts, the pundits, they still argue that even if these forces are deployed on ground, there will be a lot of pressure on these specific countries who will be part of this international stabilization force. And on ground, it again remains a concern how will Hamas react to the idea of complete disarmament, because even for now there exists no exact timeline in place on what efforts will Israel takes in terms of taking reverting back to its original position of moving away from the border regions as well. So seeing these points in line with what is actually happening, there exist matters that remains unresolved, and because of that it is hard to answer the question that will their forces be accepted or not. But since peace it has been given a chance, so we all should welcome this, and we should hope that the peace is sustained for a longer time, and these peacekeeping efforts turn into some consolidated peace building efforts as well.
And when it comes to the enforcement, I mean, some critics have said, well, it's not being enforced. You know, things are happening. Others have said, well, look, we've got to be realistic. You know, the skirmishes, tragedies are still going to occur on a smaller scale. In terms of what this second phase of the ceasefire tells us, what do you think this particular move, when it comes to Indonesian troops, tells us about how the ceasefire is developing and, crucially, how it's being enforced?
Well, the major point here is that in the second phase, it is said that there will be efforts about first is about the making the region into a terror-free zone, and that seems to be a step that has been taken. And this is the first time we are witnessing since 2014 that Hamas holds no hostages in its custody. And similarly, Israel is taking the required steps as well to make sure that peace is given a chance. But again, it is important to understand here that in the second phase, it is about demilitarization, and in that is a really pressing concern even for these Muslim countries as well who show intent to be part of this stabilization force, that should they be part of this any effort to disarm Hamas or not. This is an important aspect, and this is the exact major step that is part of the second phase of this 20 points of Trump's peace plan. So this again remains an important concern, but there will be efforts towards demilitarization, humanitarian aid, and the reconstruction efforts in Gaza. At the same time, discussion about what would the coalition government in the region would look like in terms of the technocratic setup. Should there be efforts to include some Palestinian individuals as well? Because these for now are important concerns, and one of the major reasons why even many regional countries like Pakistan, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia remains reluctant in terms of what the future will look like. So everyone is taking cautious steps in this important time, but they believe that the future would have not been possible if they are standing outside the room in terms of whatever is happening in that region. So they want to be part of that room where Israel and Trump come together, where efforts are made in terms of finding a right solution. But there is a lot more that needs to be discussed, especially what will Palestine be provided with the right opportunity towards Palestinian statehood. Now this remains a point that was even proposed in the 20 points draft that was proposed by the Muslim countries that were part of the negotiation with Donald Trump. But as we know that the solutions that were provided by the Muslim states, these were not incorporated into the plan that was originally that is in place at the moment. And these countries, especially Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, they even gave a joint statement as well that we do accept and welcome the steps taken by Donald Trump, but still we remain concerned that some of the points that they proposed were not originally included into the agreement as well. So again, there are different irritants that exist, and there should be more talk. And I hope in the coming months we will see a lot more clarity in terms of how things are going to move forward.
Yeah, it's a very good point you make, Mohammed, because of course many countries want to be, as you put it, in the room, but the people are also being very cautious about not letting people into the room that might cause more problems. And this strategy of involving non-Western, non-contentious countries in this enforcement of the ceasefire, do you think that strategy is going to continue?
Well, even in the peace board that is being built, US did ask France and UK and other Western world's important players as well to join it as well. But they believe that this effort is not just about the future of Gaza, but it is an approach by Donald Trump to showcase his disdain for UN and also build an alternative institution that will replace UN as well. So these sort of understanding exists. That is one of the reasons why many Western states were not part of this board of peace. But to your point about including non-Western states, I believe these non-Western states you are referring to are basically those Muslim states like Indonesia being the largest Muslim population, Pakistan being the only nuclear-powered Muslim state as well, Saudi Arabia and Turkey who have the most important stake in this conflict as well in terms of being an important potential, those who believe in potential hegemony within the region as well. So these are the states who have major stakes. So they should be part of it. This does not belong to the question of being part of a Western bloc or non-Western bloc. It is about who actually has real stake in this conflict. And many of these states, since their inception, have been raising voice regarding the Palestinian statehood, and it is considered as part of their core objective in foreign policy to raise their concerns about the Palestinian statehood. So that is a natural foreign policy objective for these states to be part of this whole situation that is emerging. And I believe Donald Trump only believes that these states who want certainty in international politics, because that for now what we are witnessing is that there is lack of stability in the international system, and these states understand that the way Trump is, he's trying to militarize the idea of economy, or he's trying to showcase that he is the boss in the region or across the globe as well, in terms of convincing these states that if he wants something to be done, it should be done. So these states are trying to be cautious and trying to play around him in terms of trying not to be in the bad eye of Donald Trump. I think that is all these scenarios that we need to understand, which are in development at the moment.
I mean, some would say it doesn't matter who's the boss as long as it delivers peace sooner rather than later. But I guess listening to what you're saying, that there is to some degree a mindset shift on managing post-conflict Gaza, isn't there? There are some multi-layered agendas, as you've mentioned, but there's also some fresh approaches, some new thinking. Does that make you more confident this time versus previous attempts?
Well, this time the most important thing is that there exists clear discussions about Israel has to move out in terms of taking steps to withdraw its forces. Previously, whenever these discussions were held in past, Israel always showed skepticism, and there was a concern that who will enforce that Israel actually sits and acts upon those agreed points as well. So in this regard, many Muslim states who are part of this board of peace, they believe that Donald Trump could deliver to these questions that are being raised by the Muslim world. So I think that is one of the positive aspects we need to look into. The whole board of peace includes technocrats from the US, Donald Trump's close circles as well. So that shows that there is a possibility that this time there will be there exists better chance of peace prevailing in the region and an effort towards long-lasting peace. But again, there exist concerns, and one of the important I would like to highlight is that the IDF chief of Israel, he said that he believes that the yellow line that is for now demarcated as the border from where Israel will slowly start withdrawing, he believes that this is the and this is the real, and this is the new border now. Now, that's an important concern because as per the agreement, Israel has to slowly withdraw, but that withdrawal has no timeline in place, and Israel could make any excuse in terms of this withdrawal aspect that they believe that the Hamas is not showing compliance to the agreement, or any kind of irritant could arrive at the moment, and it could cause challenges for the existing effort towards peace in the region. So there exists a lot of concerns at the moment, and even as a political analyst, I believe I should be cautious about any point I raise in terms of how things will unfold. But there exist challenges, and they need to be looked upon. And I believe that in the coming week, especially on the 19th of Feb, there will be meeting on Board of Peace, and everything will start to unfold slowly.
Mohammed, we appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at cross-border tensions after Donald Trump threatened to block the opening of a new bridge linking Canada and the United States. Don't go away.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etibar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Etibar, come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here that's been cooking. That is amazing.
I'm Katie Wilson, and A News Talks has a brand new look. In this new episode, we sit down with 3 voices, 3 personal stories, and 3 perspectives that help us understand the world we live in today.
I was really excited, and at the same time, it's a new chapter in my life.
So far, the biggest project that I've gotten myself into.
From academia to real-life experience, A News Talks goes beyond headlines, focusing on people, ideas, and the journeys that shape them.
Not by the role you have, not by the salary you have. That's what I define as a success.
Honest conversations, meaningful dialogue. This is A News Talks, coming soon.
Unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Hello, I'm J-Dad. Challenges.
Today in the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we're recording the shade of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv, Washington, London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro,
Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan,
Tehran,
Islamabad,
Istanbul,
Kabul, Port Ainu.
Welcome back. Wherever you're watching, it's great to have you with us. Now, following threats by US President Donald Trump to bar the opening of a bridge connecting Canada with the United States, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the issue will be resolved after a phone call with Trump. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump talked with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on the phone on Tuesday, after Trump threatened to bar the new $4.7 billion bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor from opening. The Gordie Howe International Bridge links the Canadian province of Ontario with the US state of Michigan and was financed by Canada. But Trump argues the project unfairly favours Canada, saying US companies and materials played only a limited role in its construction, while Canada is expected to benefit significantly from American trade traffic.
I think the president was very clear and direct in his truth, John, but just to reiterate, the fact that Canada will control what crosses the Gordie Howe Bridge and owns the land on both sides is unacceptable to the president. It's also unacceptable that more of this bridge isn't being built with more American-made materials, even more so than what President Barack Obama committed to with the Canadians at the time, at the start of the project. He also believes that the U.S. should own at least half of the bridge, have shared authority over what passes across it, and participate in the economic benefits generated by its use.
The US president also tied the dispute to broader trade tensions, including Canadian tariffs on US dairy products and Canada's recent trade engagement with China. After the call, Carney described the discussion as positive and said both countries would resolve the issue after reassuring Trump that ownership would be shared by both sides. The bridge, named after legendary Canadian ice hockey player Gordie Howe, is expected to open in early 2026, pending final safety tests and approvals.
Well, joining me now to really dig into this is A News's Andy Mioch. Andy, great to have you with us as always. Just give us your sense of what is the core objection from Washington, and how serious is this threat to delay or to block the opening?
Well, Gal, let's just first unpack what Trump had to say on Monday. This latest spat began with a lengthy social media post. Donald Trump said he will not allow for the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge until the United States is, quote, fully compensated for everything it has given Canada. He went on to spell out his complaints, saying that Ottawa has been treating the United States very unfairly. He said that Canada, which is building this bridge, owns both the Canada and the U.S. Side, that there's no American liquor on the shelves in Canada's Ontario province, and that Ottawa's tariffs on American dairy products are unacceptable and have been for years. He also blamed former President Barack Obama for allowing construction of the bridge to happen without the use of any U.S. steel. That's what Donald Trump has said. And maybe one of the most eye-catching remarks in this thread from Monday is him saying that, quote, on top of everything else, Prime Minister Mark Carney wants to make a deal with China, which he then follows up by saying China will terminate all ice hockey in Canada and eliminate the Stanley Cup. He wrapped up by saying that U.S. should own half of the bridge and that negotiations on the issue start immediately. He then held a phone call with Mark Carney, and we'll get into the details of the Canadian response in a bit. But the White House press secretary said on Tuesday that Trump told Carney that it's unacceptable that Canada will control what crosses the new bridge, and that the U.S. should own at least half of it and have shared authority over what crosses it. Now, just for some context, there are two other crossings between Detroit, which is in the U.S. state of Michigan, and Windsor, which is in the province of Ontario. There's a tunnel jointly owned by the two cities, and the Ambassador Bridge, which is privately owned by a Michigan-based family by the name of Maroon.
And it's something so powerful about the idea of a bridge, isn't there? It's obviously practically a huge concern, but also the symbolism is very strong. What are we hearing in terms of a response from Ottawa? Are the back channel conversations, or does it look like there's a real standoff happening?
Well, first of all, this is a very, very pretty bridge. Now, onto that Ottawa response. After that Trump Carney phone call, Canada's Prime Minister said he had explained to Trump that Canada has fully paid for the bridge and that Americans already have an ownership stake, as it's a 50-50 split up between Canada and the U.S. state of Michigan. He also said he told Trump that the bridge was built with Canadian and U.S. workers and steel from both countries. Now, the CBC was quick to point out that the Canada-Michigan crossing agreement signed back in 2012 guarantees its joint binational ownership despite Canada paying for the construction. It also states that the international authority which will oversee the bridge is made up of an equal number of representatives from Canada and from Michigan. Now, Canada is set to collect the toll money to recoup the cost of paying for the construction, while Michigan will be eligible for 50% of all those toll revenues once Ottawa got its due. We've also heard from the head of the Ontario province, Doug Ford, who also had his own personal spats with Donald Trump. We've heard from Windsor's mayor. Both of them are saying they're confident the bridge will open as it's fully constructed and it's fully connected to freeways on both sides of the river. And now for the behind the scenes part. You remember that privately owned Ambassador Bridge, that's where this family comes into the picture. They own the bridge and they are a major Republican political party donor. And they have spent years fighting the construction of this new bridge. On Tuesday, the New York Times reported that a member of the family met with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick about the project. Hours after that reported meeting, Trump posted about the bridge on his Truth Social platform. Wow. Now, the Maroons appealed to Trump during his first term to stop the construction of the new bridge, cancel all permits, everything, arguing that it infringed on their exclusive ability to collect tolls. That was dismissed at the time, and Trump and then Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, issued a joint statement saying that this new bridge was a vital economic link between the countries.
Wow, fascinating stuff, Andy. President Trump, not a man that likes to be told he can't do something. Nevertheless, there are certain mechanisms, certain levers that he's going to need to pull if he wants to delay this opening. Just tell us about those practical tools, those mechanisms that he's going to need to engage.
Well, it's not clear as of yet what can the U.S. president do, because his threat was rather vague. However, some of the analysts are saying and speculating that in his Monday threat, he might have been referring to the U.S. State Department presidential permit issued in 2013, which authorizes the bridge's construction and operation and can, in theory, be modified, suspended, or revoked. Separately, there's one other thing. The bridge cannot function as an international crossing without U.S. border agencies designating and staffing it as a port of entry. So these operational decisions could slow down or cancel a real-world opening.
Now, when you look at cities like Detroit, Ontario, hugely important for automotive supply chains. What's been the reaction, the sense of the impact on business?
Well, maybe one situation paints the clearest picture of all. Now, this Ambassador Bridge let me get the exact number here, reportedly carries about $360 million a day in two-way cargoes, and it represents a quarter of the value of all U.S.-Canada goods trade. But it is a very vulnerable trade choke point, and the example I'm talking about happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, when truckers protesting Canada's vaccine mandate for drivers blocked the bridge, forcing auto companies to resort to air freight for those critical components, and air is quite a lot more expensive than ground transport. We've heard from former Michigan governor, who is a Republican himself, Rick Snyder, and he helped broker the deal with Canada's government to build the bridge. He wrote in a Detroit News op-ed following Trump's social media post that if the Gordie Howe Bridge is delayed or stopped, the only winner would be the Ambassador Bridge Company, which has, in his words, hindered commerce for decades. He added that the new bridge will provide for faster economic growth on both sides.
And finally, Andy, what should we read into this? Is this a strategic move, do you think, by President Trump, or is it merely just a piece of sort of opportunism?
Well, some are certainly seeing it as opportunism, given the grievances list he presented on Monday. But looking back, the U.S. president has made a number of threats towards Canada since returning to the White House, even on several occasions. You can remember he mused about acquiring Canada as the 51st state. But the tensions ramped up last month after Carney's visit to Beijing, when Trump threatened a 100% tariff on Canada if it follows through on a trade deal with China. Now, a bit on that visit, China and Canada agreed to lower tariffs, with Ottawa lowering a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, which, by the way, it imposed together with the U.S. to 6.1%, which is the most favored nation rate for up to 49,000 vehicles per year. China, in return, agreed to slash the tariffs on Canada's canola seeds from 84% to some 15%. Another catalyst we've seen was Carney's speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he spoke of that rupture in the world order and the need for middle powers such as Canada to band together to stand against superpowers. Now, he did not name names, nor the United States nor Donald Trump, but everyone got the picture. Donald Trump even rescinded the invitation for Canada or Carney to join his Board of Peace. Following that, at the end of January, Trump then threatened to decertify and tariff all Canadian-made planes. Now, all of these little spats, all of this tension, this turbulence, comes ahead of a scheduled review of a U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal in July this year, and negotiations are looking like they're going to be tough ones.
Wow, so many layers to this. Andy, thank you very much for joining us as always. Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents all around the world for the very latest developments from their regions. Do stay with us.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to Primetime. Now to our correspondents all around the world. And starting in Europe, migration is back at the centre of the political debate as EU lawmakers back tougher asylum rules designed to speed up deportations and tighten border controls. Supporters argue the measures bring order, while critics warn of risks to fundamental rights. Anita Sharma reports.
Welcome to This Day in Europe and a major step toward tougher asylum rules. EU lawmakers back changes designed to speed up returns of rejected applicants and tighten control over migratory flows. The European Parliament's vote updates the bloc's asylum procedures regulation and creates a new law on migrant returns, but the package still needs final sign-off from the EU's 27 governments. The package allows EU states to fast-track asylum rejections and deportations by creating an EU-wide list of so-called safe countries where migrants can be sent back, including Egypt and Tunisia. Under the new rules, an asylum application can be refused if the person could have obtained protection in a country the EU deems safe, tightening eligibility for protection inside the bloc. Lawmakers also backed common EU standards on returns, including new obligations for people given a return order. Migrants who refuse to leave voluntarily could face prison terms for non-cooperation, and member states will be allowed to set up so-called return hubs outside EU territory that would mirror Italy's controversial offshoring deal with Albania. The measures form part of the EU's broader migration pact from 2023 and is due to be fully implemented by June. Supporters say the tougher approach is needed after more than 1 million people, mainly from Syria, arrived from 2015 to 2016, fueling voter anger and boosting nationalist parties across the continent. But humanitarian groups, plus green and left-wing lawmakers warn the reforms risk breaching the 1951 Refugee Convention and dehumanizing EU migration policy by sending vulnerable people back to countries where they may not be safe. Overall, the EU vote underscores just how central migration has become to Europe's political battles and how far EU governments are now willing to go to speed up deportations and tighten control at their borders. Whether these tougher rules deliver order without eroding fundamental rights is a test that will play out in the months and years ahead. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Georgia has confirmed it will attend the 2026 Munich Security Conference after sitting out last year's gathering. Now, the move comes amid strained transatlantic ties and ongoing scrutiny of the country's democratic direction. A News' correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has the details.
Georgia's government has confirmed that it will participate in the 2026 Munich Security Conference, with the Prime Minister Irakli Kabakidze stating that the invitation has been accepted and that the country will be represented, possibly by Foreign Minister Maka Bajarishvili. The Prime Minister himself will not attend. The announcement follows a notable absence in 2025 when the government administration confirmed that Georgia did not participate in the Munich Security Conference. The administration did not clarify at the time whether an official invitation had been extended or not. Despite the government's absence, the 2025 conference prominently featured Georgia. Former President Salome Zurabishvili and opposition leader George Gahari addressed concerns over democratic backsliding, alleged Russian hybrid influence, and the need for new, free elections. They also held high-level meetings with European and US representatives. The Munich Security Conference, to be held on February 13-15, is one of the world's most significant annual forums on global security and foreign policy. It brings together heads of state, ministers, lawmakers, military officials, and policy experts to discuss pressing international challenges, including war, regional conflicts, NATO cooperation, and transatlantic relations. This year's conference comes at a sensitive time for U.S.-European relations. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to lead a sizable American delegation alongside more than 50 members of Congress and senior U.S. political figures. According to the conference chairman, Wolfgang Ischinger, transatlantic relations are currently facing a considerable crisis of trust and credibility, making strong U.S. representation particularly significant. For Georgia, returning to the conference after its 2025 absence could signal an attempt to maintain or recalibrate engagement with its Western partners. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Uzbekistan is expanding renewable energy projects in underserved communities, aiming to attract $230 million for small solar stations to boost local incomes and improve infrastructure. A News' Seville Rajapova reports.
Uzbekistan plans to install small solar power plants in 1,000 mahallas as part of a broader program to reduce poverty and stimulate regional development. A mahalla is a local neighborhood community that serves as a traditional form of self-governance and social organization across the country. Under the initiative, each community will receive solar photoelectric stations with a capacity of 300 to 500 kilowatts. The facilities are expected to be transferred to mahallas on preferential 7-year terms, allowing them to generate additional income through electricity production. Funding will come from both domestic and international sources. The Fund for Reconstruction and Development is set to allocate $110 million, while another $120 million is expected from international financial institutions, bringing total investment to around $230 million. Officials say the solar rollout forms part of a wider reforms targeting 37 districts and more than 900 mahallas with difficult socio-economic conditions, alongside measures to improve infrastructure, modernize energy networks, and support local entrepreneurship. It is Seville Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Iran's foreign minister says Tehran has entered a new round of talks with Washington in what he calls a serious and clear-eyed approach, while a senior security figure has warned against Israel's role in undermining the process. A News' Tehran correspondent reports.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says that Tehran agreed to resume the mediated nuclear talks with Washington out of seriousness and with open eyes, relying on the support of the country's armed forces. He made this statement on Tuesday after a meeting with Commander-in-Chief of the Iranian Army, Major General Amir Khatami, saying that Iran will continue the diplomatic process based on mutual respect and seriousness. According to Foreign Ministry website, Iran's top diplomat was quick to add that Tehran has taken the path of negotiations with open eyes and without trusting the other side. Following the Iran-US talks last Friday in Oman, Araghchi has held phone contacts with his counterparts from the regional countries, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. On Tuesday, he had a phone call with Pakistani Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar, during which he explained Iran's position regarding a fair and equitable nuclear deal. Meantime, Secretary of Supreme National Security Council Ali Larijani warned that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the United States is an attempt to undermine the talks between Tehran and Washington. Turaj Shiradilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Afghanistan has imposed a full ban on medicine imports from Pakistan as ongoing tensions continue to disrupt trade and border movement. The decision follows months of closures that have already hit markets nationwide. A News' Kabul correspondent Tamim Bahis reports now.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Finance says the import of medicines from Pakistan is now banned at all custom points across the country. In a statement, the ministry spokesperson Abdul Qayyum Nasser said authorities would strictly monitor the borders and prevent the smuggling of medicines and other goods through illegal routes. He warned that legal action would be taken against anyone violating the new order. The ministry has also urged importers to seek alternative routes for medicines and essential goods, saying the government is working to provide a full support and facilitation to traders during the transition. The move follows months of border closures by Pakistan amid rising political and security tensions between the two countries. Key crossings along the Afghan-Pakistan frontier have remained shut, severely affecting trade flows and markets inside Afghanistan. Islamabad has accused Kabul of allowing militant groups to operate from Afghan territory, an allegation Kabul authorities firmly deny. Officials in Kabul say they do not allow anyone to use Afghan soil to threaten other countries and have urged Pakistan to address its own internal security challenges. The ban on Pakistani medicines is the latest sign of the growing strain in relations, with trade, travel and diplomatic exchanges all affected in recent months. Authorities say alternative supply routes are being arranged, but traders warn that prolonged disruptions could push up prices and limit access to essential goods. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Well, that brings us to the end of Prime Time. We'll be back soon with plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.